Hello, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Monday, the 19th of February. Before we begin, I ask that you would hold the Lassie family in your prayers. Today at St. Saviour's, we will gather to remember Leslie at a memorial service, and this will be my last service at St. Saviour's. And she has a beautiful family of daughters and a son and beautiful grandchildren, and it'll be a tough day. It'll be a day of celebration, but also be a day of grief. So I ask you hold Leslie and Leslie's family in your prayers today. Today, in my efforts to be able to leave this book in Wainwright and not take it with me to Manitoba, Jesus for the Non-Religious by Shelby Spong, I am sharing with you a couple of lines he's got written here that really spoke to me about how we think about Jesus and um, how we think about people in general, how we interpret what has gone before us that has become great. And he says here, he starts the chapter out, it says, "There was no star over Bethlehem." It's an interesting chapter. You should read it. But he says here, "Birth stories are always fanciful. They are never historical. No one waits outside a maternity ward for a great person to be born." No one waits outside a maternity ward for a great person to be born. Then he goes on to say, "An individual has first to become great. Then tales presaging that future greatness begin to circulate around his or her origins." I agree with him wholeheartedly. I think that if we were to take a look, that's why journals I think are so important, because when we look at the people who are famous, people who have influenced the world, especially those people who have kept journals their whole lives, or people whose maybe their parents kept a journal, the moms and dads who do the whole thing, a baby's first lock of hair and all first steps and first words and things like that. That allows us to have an objective, bear with me here, an objective perspective on who that person was before they became influential. And it may seem subjective, but think about it this way. If I write in a journal and I am having a good day, a bad day, whatever happens, whatever it is I am writing about in that journal is contemporaneous. It is how I am feeling in that moment. It is how I interpreted what just happened. And I write that journal, and 30 years later I come back to it. Chances are that my memory of that moment, even if I have a memory, maybe it was such a big occasion or situation that I do have a memory, but my memory of it is going to be different. My memory of it is going to have been layered and layered upon by the interpretation of it and how it changed my life. The very things that happened to me because of that moment that I'm remembering will actually change the memory itself. The way I think about it will be different because of how it has influenced me. But if I have a journal and can go back and say, "Oh, that's what I was feeling in that moment," first of all, it can take me back to that moment, and I can, I can unclothe that moment, that memory, from what actually happened, and it gives me a perspective of that. But most often, we don't have that, do we? When someone incredible is born, unless it's someone like Prince William or something where it's documented because we know that the trajectory of their life is already sort of predetermined. For the most part, we don't know. When Martin Luther King Jr. was born, we didn't know, his parents didn't know, they maybe hoped, but they didn't know that he was going to change the world, that he was going to change the future of the United States, that someone would assassinate him. When um, when the Pope was born, when Pope Francis was born, his parents would have no idea how he would go on and grow and become the person that he became with God's help. He was simply the person he was born to be in that moment. And the reality is that when Jesus was born, they didn't have someone waiting outside the manger to write every single detail down. They didn't have, they didn't know in that moment what would happen. Even indeed, if Mary and Joseph did have an inkling, if they did understand that this was indeed the child of God, that they maybe had a sense of the awe of the moment, of the gravity of this particular birth, but they had no idea of the details. They didn't know how long he would live or who he would make friends with or what he would do, or that some people would think he was a rabble rouser, and others would think he was insane. Others would think he was a hero. Some would think he wasn't real. They didn't know that. They simply knew that their child had been born and they were responsible for that child. This idea that an individual has first to become great, then tales presaging that future greatness begin to circulate around his or her origins. I think way too much, for us Christians, I think way too much emphasis is placed on looking back and assuming that every story told about the birth of Jesus is absolutely literally true. Why do we need that? If if the truth that we need to hang on to is the truth that we have been given this incredible gift of love and salvation by God through Jesus Christ, why is it so important to us that it has to be all wrapped up in a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, born in a manger on December 25th in about 4 BCE? Like, why? How? If we're talking about something so miraculous and something so big and something so inconceivable as our eternal lives, something that cannot be boxed in, we cannot wrap it up and put a bow on it. If we're talking about the gift that we have been given is so massive and so beyond our own comprehension, then why do we need to make it so small in its beginnings that it comes wrapped up in a tiny little box with a bow on it? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Why can't we just accept the gift that's been given to us? One of the gifts that I have in my husband, Rob, is he doesn't ask me, and he doesn't tolerate me asking him why I love him or why he loves me. I mean, what's the point? I could name I could name hundreds of tiny little things that he does or doesn't do, that indicate to me that he loves me, or help me to love him. But that is not the love itself. Me saying to him that you're a great cook and you take care of me and you plate my food for me, and you try to make sure that we have variety so I don't get bored in what I eat. Um, um, he's a foodie. He's an awesome foodie and he's a great cook. Not so good at cleaning up the dishes, but hey, that's how I love him. I clean up the dishes. But the point is that each of those things do not equal his love for me. They are signs that he loves me. And I can ask him to list off a litany of things that tell me how he loves me. I can share him with all the ways that I know he loves me. And all that is describing what is. It's actually taking away from me experiencing it because I'm wasting my time talking about it or asking him to describe it when what we should be doing is experiencing it. And I think maybe this book has really been powerful for me, helping me to understand it doesn't need to be about the literal answers. It doesn't need to be about what do the Gospels say as gospel truth, but what is as gospel fact, but what is the truth behind the stories? What is it that I'm learning and experiencing about Jesus in my life because I listen to the stories and I let them inform me? They are not journal entries made the day that Jesus did something, which proves absolutely beyond a doubt that this is historical. But nor do they need to be. No one stood outside that manger anticipating the birth of a great being for whom that moment had to be captured in its totality and absolutely precisely because ... No, the point is that his birth was a beginning. It was the beginning for us. And that's what we need to celebrate. Don't worry so much about the birth story being fanciful. Birth stories are always fanciful. They are never historical. No one waits out a maternity ward for a great person to be born, including for Jesus. Not really. But what matters is what happens when they come out of that maternity ward and how they live their life and what they do with it. And then how we deal with that, we who love them and who are influenced by them. Give it some thought. Have a great day. God bless you, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.